Good morning. We're here today for an intergenerational dialogue. My name is Leslie Hansen, and I'm a leadership advocate for Applied Wisdom for the nonprofit sector. And we're here with 4 Gen Z leaders who, each one of whom has already had a big impact in the area that they've chosen to touch. And thank you to Jeremiah Lineberger for helping coordinate this conversation. And in dialogue with these leaders is Jim Morgan, who is a longtime Fortune 500 CEO here in Silicon Valley, and who also is a major philanthropist in the area. He and his wife have had a huge impact, not only on the Bay Area, but nationally. And Jim now in his life is focused on supporting and equipping the next generation of leaders who are in the arena addressing problems facing humanity. And to do that, he has, among other things, written a book called Applied Wisdom for the Nonprofit Sector, which is an assemblage of tips for leaders to use that they can digest quickly and apply immediately. And so to start the conversation, I'd like to ask Jim to talk about how he assembled his tips and what drove him to publish Applied Wisdom.
Thanks, Leslie. It's great to be here with you. I learned about Textron, and I was able to go to join Textron after the military. And I'd also, because I'd sort of started those tips, I kept a list of them. And later on, I realized that things like court sense, I learned in 5th grade playing basketball in Indiana, because that's what you did in Indiana, and regulation games. And so that kind of got the thing started. So I retired after about 3 decades with Applied, and I started to do a 3-ring notebook with my grandkids. I have 5 or 6 of them, and they as I went through them, I realized that some of them I got earlier. And so my friend said, you got to put those tips in the book. So what was started out as a 3-ring notebook was a self-published book about 245 pages, but it had the tips in it. And so then I found somebody self-published that helped me, or somebody helped me write it, and somebody helped me self-publish it. And the fellow that helped me self-publish it called me up one day, and he said, "How many tips do you think are in the booklet, or in the big book?" I said, "Well, we highlighted 10 in this book, probably 30." He said, "Well, there's 100." So in the meantime, the woman that heads our Linda Verhulm, who heads our foundation, she said, "You need a booklet, Jim, because nobody in nonprofits has time to read this. But I've read it 3 times, and it's excellent. So we need to do something with 40 pages." So that was this. And then a little bit later, Thad, who helped me self-publish, called up, and he said about the 100. And then a little bit later, about 6 months, he called up and he said, "I was really interested in that, and I'm not going to charge you. But I organized the tips this weekend." And he sent the draft. And so, of course, our smart group, we thought we'd improve it. So after about 6 months, we gave up and published it. So that's where you got these free. And we make these available on the website at no charge for nonprofits. So it's been it's really taken off.
So with that, Jeremiah, can we start with you and hear what's the first thing you'd like to ask Jim?
Hello, my name is Jeremiah Limeberger, and I currently serve as a development and data analysis at the African American Community Service Agency, and it's an honor to be here. And my first question for Jim would be that As a Gen Z generation, I feel like our generation, we like to sprint to things to the success. But hearing your story, knowing that you learned your business from your farmer in the canyon, what advice would you give us when we're trying to get to success, but you're leading and being a good leader in the community? Not in the community, but you employed over 15,000 people in different countries. And we see that as, oh, wow, we want to be Jim, but we don't know that you started from this and that one small thing taught you how to start a business and to run a business. What advice would you give Gen Z?
Well, I think the first thing I give my grandkids and anybody that asks is learn how to work. So get a job of some kind. Doesn't make so much difference in the beginning what it is, but if you get in the habit of getting up early, getting to work and ready to go first thing. Vince Lombardi, a football coach in Wisconsin years ago, said, if you're not 15 minutes early, you're late. And those are habits that make it possible to succeed. And then you kind of build from there.
Thank you for that. Michaela, what would you like to ask?
Hello, my name is Michaela. I am a second year political science student at San Jose State University. And thank you so much for being here today. And I just wanted to know, how did you know what you wanted to do early on in your career professionally? And what do you think that students today should know about getting on their career path in these early stages? And what wisdom would you put upon these new generation of Gen Zers trying to get into the work field?
If you're working, you begin to see things. So that's why get a job of some kind. Just pick something you like to do. And I tell my grandkids to write down what you think you like to do, and then what you think you don't like to do. And just kind of keep that list along with your tips list that I'd encourage everybody to start. Even before you have a job, you can start a tip list. So, and those things will let you eventually have I call it a feeling in your tummy as to what you want to do. I mean, I worked around equipment at the farm and a cannery, and so I knew I liked to work on equipment, and I did maintenance and electrical maintenance, plumbing maintenance as a teenager, and so I picked engineering. I picked mechanical, and I picked Cornell because it was a co-ed school. Well, it was good engineering too, but it was a co-ed school, and so I knew I didn't want to be an engineer as an engineer, but I was interested in technical business, and so that was kind of the path that I ended up following. Became a project manager and a program manager, and then a opera division head.
Thank you for that. Okay, Keith, it's all you.
I'm Keith Hertzberg. I currently serve as a budget and innovation advisor to San Jose Mayor Matt Mahan.
Yeah.
It's great to be with you today, and
Good.
thank you for sitting down with young leaders like us and giving us and sharing the wisdom that you've gained through your career and life. My question to you is: leaders wake up every day and they have competing priorities, opinions of their staff, maybe of their family. And you, from what I've heard, have been very discerning. And every day you wake up and you choose a set of priorities that you're going to tackle for the day. And for that day, you're going to accomplish a couple things and make sure that you kind of check something off a list.
Right.
Gen Z, we kind of face this kind of double-edged sword. One, we have a lot of technology tools that are saying, hey, we can help you be productive and organize your life. But on the other end of that sword is you're adding another tool that adds complexity to your day. How are you in your career and in your life able to be discerning and have a lens of scrutiny or judgment to make sure that whatever the top three things of that day, you were deciding with your cup of coffee in the morning and saying, that's what I'm going to get done today?
Probably the other thing that is important to that is what are the driving forces? Because if you look, there are certain things around you that are happening, and that your court sense should help you pick which of those things to do next. Because on the court, you throw the basketball in, you got to know where the lines are, because in some places they were only that wide before it's a concrete wall, things like that. And you got to know where your defensive people are, and you got to know who you can pass to, when you ought to shoot. So those are things that are simple, but they're driving forces for you, and you want to look at what those are. And then I think after that is you pick a couple of 2 or 3 of them at a time and work on those. But keep in mind what you want to do in a week, in a month, a quarter, maybe 6 months. You probably don't need to go. I mean, you do a long-range plan maybe once a year or something, but the idea is to stay focused. Most people do too many things, try to do too many things, and so therefore the implementation isn't successful. And the real thing about the booklet is in 3 sections: culture, planning, and implementation. And most nonprofits do a pretty good job of mission, do a pretty good job of putting a plan together, a little weak in implementation. And so my experience with them is that I'd go on the board and we'd have a new head. We'd be either approved or get a new mission. Then we'd get a plan. And then by the time we got any implementation, we'd gotten a new head and a new mission or same mission and then a new plan. We never quite got to the implementation. So that's why this emphasizes implementation.
Well, thank you for that. Okay, Nina.
Hello. Thank you so much for the opportunity to chat today. I love the intergenerational conversation that we're having here today. My name is Nina Trong. I serve as Assistant Director for Community and Government Relations for San Jose State University's president. And my question is, there's a quote that says, "To be a great leader, you must be a great follower." And you mentioned in your book the distinguishing between high caliber people and highly competent people. So in forming teams for an organization, what is some advice that you would have to ensure that we have a little bit of both, a little bit of competent, but also a little bit of high caliber, and really cultivating teams that are able to problem solve, be resilient, especially during times of chaos?
When you're doing your due diligence, you need to find at least 2 negatives that you can live with, because none of us are perfect. So for the job and for the culture they have to come into, are they going to make it? And because they're going to be competent. What tends to happen is you say, well, we're going to have 3 people interview them. You have 3 people interview them. At least a couple of them like them. And if you like them and you're doing the hiring, they're the ones to get. You don't know what if you have had no negatives, and you really don't look for negatives because you want them to come in. That's a good rule.
Thank you. Okay, Keith, let's go back to you.
So, Jim, I really appreciated the concept of book it and ship it from your book. And I think this concept makes a lot of sense. And, to get something out to the world and show them that you could be a successful business, a competent nonprofit, a good government, you have to be able to make progress on certain projects.
Yeah.
Gen Z, we face certain anxieties or pressures of getting it perfect, 100% perfect, and letting the perfect be the good. What advice can you shed on not letting perfect be the enemy of the good, and making sure that, or what is your tell that something is ready for the world, and how do you correct it when it is in the world, and if it's not perfect yet?
Well, it's one of those things that I think is important is to as you think through something, you don't have to. You need to make a decision without perfect information. What I used to do was I'd just be walking in the halls and I'd stop and talk to somebody and they'd want to tell me all the great things. And I said, well, I kind of need to know what you're having trouble with. So that got to be a joke. And you got to give Jim the bad news. So that eventually evolved into good news is no news. No news is bad news. But bad news is good news if you do something about it. And that kind of became I think the bad news is good news of the major book and that worked because Dr. Maiden and I have lunch usually every 3 or 4 months. And I think last year we were having lunch, and I don't know how it came up, but we were trying to think of a time when one of us didn't know some bad news that before it got to the San Jose Mercury or our board or Wall Street. And we couldn't think of that. And then, I don't know, we kind of reminisced on that a little bit. And then we realized that we couldn't remember a time that bad news had gotten out that both of us didn't know. So it kind of told you that bad news is good news.
Hello. So my question, so I love going into this court sense talk that we are doing. And so when you are navigating the court, you need skills, you need to learn how to dribble and, shoot for sure. But what skills do you think that incoming freshmen in college should be prioritizing to navigate this constantly changing environment? Sometimes they feel overwhelmed. Sometimes they're feeling, high sense of anxiety. And so what do you think as Gen Zers we should start prioritizing skill-wise, mindset-wise? Thank you.
Well, I think first thing is to kind of dampen your anxiety. Because you can only do so much about most things. So pick what you can do, and that might give you some momentum. So that's kind of just a general perspective. And then I think you need some financial experience, whether that's accounting or you're working at one of my grandkids, when she's 13, worked for a lawyer and did his books, put his money that came in the bank and stuff like that. And so she kind of had a sense that, and so now if you need a loan, you go to her. And then, being able to write is a critical skill for most everything. I took typing. I can't remember why in high school, but of course that was before computers came, and that's worked out. That's helped me. I can kind of naturally type, and that works. So there's some basic skills that you don't think of that you might need that, and then pick what you're interested in. So see what it is if you make your list of what you'd like to do, then what do you need to know to do what you like to do?
My question next will be, as young Gen Zers, there's not a lot of us in the nonprofit sector. So, as we enter in the nonprofit sector, what are some of the best tips and tools we can get from Applied Wisdom? Reading the book, we may think Applied Wisdom is for like the executive level, but my manager always tells me that leadership is not based off title.
Right.
So, what advice can you give to young Gen Zers that leadership is not based off title, and what do you think we could get most out of Applied Wisdom?
Well, I think if you go on the website, there's a video that has that's done by AI. That's 22 minutes, and it takes this thick book and sorts out all the things about what's in it for nonprofits. It wasn't written necessarily for nonprofits, but it picks them out, and it has a man and a woman discussing that for about 22 minutes, and we couldn't believe what a good job that was.
And then a follow-up question on that. In your time at being the CEO of Applied Materials, can you look back and remember when you hired that one young person and you transformed them into a great leader? Because my dad always trained me that you always bring the next person up. And in your life of success, he talked about dream team. And when you were creating that dream team, what did you look for in the young people?
Well, of course, I had to have the basic skills. And we looked for a cultural fit, but don't forget we had multicultural. In fact, there's about 10 people who worked together 20 years or so, starting in the 80s, early 80s. And they get together for lunch periodically. And last year they did this. And somehow the question came up, what makes us all alike? That was kind of strange. Well, what made them all alike is they were all a different culture. Chinese, Japanese, Indian, German.
Yeah.
And so that was the tribe we had.
Yeah.
They worked together great. I can't understand why the world can't work together.
I really enjoyed your book because it really talks about culture and creating and on this topic of working in multicultural organizations and ensuring that when our organizations have the vision to really help society in ways beyond our own individual experience. And something that I've learned, something that I've also seen, kind of navigating as a Gen Z person, from government to higher education to also in the private sector, that sometimes care is seen as a weakness. And something that I've been really intentional about is cultivating care as a strength. So how do you, in your book, you really show that, and that's why I really resonated with it. So how do you strategize care as a strength in organizations and ensuring that, honesty, trust, respect are at the main foundations of an organization?
I don't really know. Our culture was built by a very diverse group. It wasn't just me. I mean, in other words, I gave, I had bad news, good. I mean, there's things that I did do, but they were, they had a natural ability, or they developed an ability to work together.
I'd like to ask a follow-up to that about in Applied Wisdom, you talk about how, can you talk about how taking care of yourself is an example for your employees to take care of themselves,
that's a good
things
point,
that
yeah.
you did.
I'm not really sure where this came about, but it was pretty clear because we were really working hard. I mean, when I got there, the bank could have called us and we'd have been done anytime for a couple of years. Fortunately, it didn't. And we were able to, I just encourage. I used to, because I played sports in high school and so forth, and then I tended to work out in college. So I always had a plan, an exercise, and always ate. I had good. My family and my wife were she claims she's not a good cook, but nobody in the family will listen to that. But it's we ate well and healthy, and so I encouraged everybody to bring a pair of walking shoes and take a walk and talk or whatever, So that was kind of the culture we built.
And I think that's actually, it leads into my question very well. I really appreciated the concept of doing the whole job, and I couldn't help but apply that wisdom to outside of the boardroom or outside of your
Right.
professional sphere and apply it to your personal life. And I wanted to ask you, being such a accomplished person, and the added complexity of your wife being in her own right a very accomplished person, in the state Senate, how did you two do the whole job professionally and taking care of your home life, and what advice could you shed on that lane of your life?
Well, I think you first take care of your health. So we generally had pretty regular schedules. I got up early, or both of us did, and we ate regularly. Had a good breakfast always, and just took care of ourselves and the family, and as a priority, and then scheduling. We both knew how to work. We grew up on farms, so we started and make decisions because nobody else is around sometimes. So that just gives you a base.
Can you talk a little bit about how you say that priority management is more important than schedule management, or more effective?
Yeah. Well, I think I always believe that there's certain things you have to get done now, but there's other things that you need to do things now in order to do them in 6 months. So, for example, if you need some talent to do what is in your 6 months, what you're going to start in the 6 month, if you don't get the talent in that period of time, you can't start the 6 months. So I think that's why I think of it in categories, and they feed into. They should be feeding. The three ought to kind of be feeding into what you're trying to do.
I was just going to follow up to, I appreciate, the scheduling aspect of it all and making sure that you're really well coordinated with your family and in your professional life. How do you find time then within that scheduling to make sure that you guys are supporting each other in your own accomplishments? Obviously, your business career, running for election, I think was probably a piece of your guys' life at one point in time.
Yeah.
How did you guys make sure that you were there and showing up for each other past the schedule, but spiritually, emotionally, whatever that might be?
Well, I mean, we just always discussed kind of what our priorities were, and we didn't try to have too many. I think a lot of people try to have too many, and so then they don't have a priority. So that's probably once you go above the basics, that's probably the important part.
My next question would be, from being a CEO, then being a well-known philanthropist, what advice could you give to young people like myself that work in a nonprofit field that need to attract philanthropy? And what was your ideal way of giving, and how do I build relationships? What advice can you give to someone young to build authentic relationships and cultivating that relationship?
Well, I mean, if you're in development, you need to bring value to the person that you're trying to develop. And so that's where the 18 tips that my friend had kind of is a guide. But I and most people, at least, well, Becky and I don't know necessarily most people, but we believed in being sure the leaders were good leaders and being sure that we understood sort of the essence of what they're trying to do. And it pays to keep your people informed, both the good and the bad. That's why the bad news is, you'd rather hear the bad news directly than find out about it and have to ask.
I just want to backtrack a little bit into our conversation previously about decision making. And so I know that you've made a lot of high impact decisions over your career, but how do you make decisions when you don't have all the information? And how do you think Gen Zers should navigate making decisions without all the information when it, brings a little bit of anxiety, or maybe it's just, how to navigate it in the world around us?
I gave a kind of a thing like this that had applied for the nonprofit people. And a young woman came up and she said, "Jim, you say make a decision, but how do you know when you can make a decision?" And I said, "Well, you just need to practice. So you start making them. And when you kind of think make it, but understand the most important thing is to follow up, and you can change. In other words, manage the decision after you make it, and you can change it. And if you understand that, then you aren't so afraid to make a decision. So, we call it manage the consequences. Make a decision, manage the consequences, but understand that even when you made that decision right at that time, this is kind of a tough example, but if you'd you might have been in Israel and made a decision, and the world changed the next day. So, did you know that was likely to happen? I guess not, but whenever you make a decision, it can start to change. So make it, and then manage the consequences.
Thank you so much, Jim, for the opportunity to speak with you today. Kathleen and Leslie for setting this up. Something I got out of this conversation is simple, is understanding that cultivating culture is the most important thing when you are in business, and that culture is how you make a dream team.
Thank you so much, Jim, for the opportunity to speak today having this amazing conversation, and especially the rest of the team for really putting this together. Something that I really resonated with me again was high caliber versus competent people, and as a becoming leader, I'm really excited to bring in the wisdom from this book and our conversation into building teams that help cultivate our vision here. I think that our next generation is really very blessed to have amazing role models like yourself to help us lead the way in, again, cultivating organizations that use care as a strategy, but also cultivating cultures of care and cultures of culture. But thank you so much.
Thank you for having us today, Jim. I really enjoyed being on the panel and hearing from you about your wisdom that you've been able to accumulate across your life and your career. Something that really stuck with me today, though, is that in order for leaders and anyone doing business, nonprofit, I think the most important thing for them is to be intentional. And I think that intention in your planning and in your approach to people and in your approach to, making partnerships or, setting out and trying to accomplish something. I think intention is everything. So I really look forward to taking some of the wisdom that you've shed and applying it to my life. So thank you.
Yeah, that's, I think a good thing is that the leader has to set the example. you have to walk the talk. I don't think we mentioned but that's one of the most significant parts to building culture. If you have one or two of your executives that aren't willing to walk the talk, it's going to be disruptive.
I just wanted to say thank you so much for being here and, talking to us. It's actually just an amazing experience and opportunity to even just be talking to you today. So thank you so much. Something that one of the last things you said was making decisions and then, dealing with the consequences, and as someone that's just coming into college and someone that's, right now making these decisions that sometimes feel like they're going to make or break me. You also said understanding like the fundamentals, of leadership and being in your career path. And so taking those fundamentals, it'll help, me be intentional with the decisions I make. So ultimately the consequences won't be so severe. And so I just thank you so much for the wisdom that you put upon us today.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you so much to each one of you for being here, for your thoughtful questions and your presence here, and for the work that each one of you is doing here on behalf of humanity here on the Earth planet, which we all appreciate. And thank you to Jim, of course.